You are listening to Draw 4 Podcast. Good tidings, and thanks for joining us. My name is Joseph Dunlap. I'm the executive producer of Draw 4 Podcast and a featured writer for Manaleak.com.
And I'm Ben Cottee. I occasionally write for Manaleak and Cube enthusiast.
And I am Randal Minnick, and I work alongside Joseph over Modern and many different Commander formats.
Randall, when I met you, I was working at the Gathering Place in Abilene, and you were what, 15?
I was younger than that.
You were younger than that?
I was probably, I'd say, about 12, 13.
I think you were about 13, and everyone knew you as, it's Randall. There's Randall. But then you got that reputation for being quite a talented brewer in Modern and Standard.
Eventually, I kind of veered away from Standard. I wasn't the biggest fan of the rotating, but I do understand the appeal of Standard, and I have played Standard. I am more into some of the Eternal formats, including Modern, Legacy, and Commander.
Well, this is a good podcast episode for you with Team Manaleak, because Ben is also somewhat of a Modern enthusiast, as am myself. I'm getting into it more and more. The upkeep, which is our opening topic, our warm-up topic, if you will, is actually going to be centered around Modern, because we like to come back to Modern. And you have told me about some Modern brews that you've been working on, and we've been testing them on X-Mage a bit, and you actually did beat me when I was playing Eldrazi against you. So why don't you introduce what you'll be talking about for the upkeep?
Yeah, I'll probably be going over a couple different lists that are good as of now, like one of my home brews, and probably something that I feel one of the decks that will be becoming a lot better as time goes on, and as soon as Shadows over Innistrad and some of the newer sets release.
So when you say a deck is good in Modern right now, what you mean is that it's good against Eldrazi as well as the other anti-Eldrazi decks like Affinity and Lantern Control?
It's built to beat some of the top decks right now, and most of the format right now is heavily centered around lands and artifacts. Those two are the biggest things right now that you have to watch out for, because the land base in Eldrazi and a lot of the artifacts for Affinity and Lantern.
Okay, so what are the decks that you are looking at right now that are good against lands and artifacts?
As of now, I'm looking into Merfolk as one of the biggest contenders for being a competitive deck that's just good all around and always has been, as well as a new contender I feel will be very good against a lot of the current meta, which is Jundpox, Smallpox, and Dredgemine.
What other decks are you going to be showcasing for us today?
I will be going over a Jeskai list, a Jeskai control list based around Isochron Scepter, as well as a Zombie and Mortar Pod list that I feel like will be very good in the future. The Jeskai list is Jeskai No Stick, which is based off of a old Legacy deck where you'd put Oren's Chant, which would say you take no damage and your opponent can't play spells, on Isochron Scepter and continuously keep your opponent from playing Magic.
I'm not sure that makes me feel like I should be rooting for the Eldrazi in that matchup.
The only difference between the fairness of both decks is the fact that Eldrazi's taking over most of the format, and Isochron Scepter is more fun for the person playing it than the person playing Eldrazi.
So kind of like Lantern.
It's like one of those Lantern control lists where you feel like you're having a great time playing it. It's just not for the other person sitting across the other end of the table.
So tell us about No Stick and what's fun about that for you.
All right. So what No Stick is Isochron Scepter is a artifact that allows you to keep recurring a spell continuously if it is a 2 or less drop instant. Now, using that, you put in a lot of cards that are really good against certain decks, as well as cards that are just generally really good to have a recurring ability. One of which of those cards is standard Lightning Bolt, which you could use. Now, I feel like Lightning Helix is just a strict improvement. If you're going to pay 2 mana to play the spell, you might as well get 2 mana worth with Lightning Helix. Like Lightning Helix it kind of just shuts off all the aggressive decks. It helps against Affinity, because you can keep recurring Lightning Helix, as well as a card that I feel was really funny in this format with Cord going everywhere is Shadow of Doubt.
Yep, I love Shadow of Doubt for my Grixis control lists, and the first time you play it in Game 1, you can easily sideboard it out because they're going to be playing around it for the rest of the match. But looking at this list, there's one card, and you've got a reader here because I can't for the life of me think of what this card is. Holy Day is a 4 of. What's the card Holy Day?
Holy Day is 1 white, instant, prevent all combat damage that would be dealt this turn.
It's white.
It's kind of like it's a white version of Fog, which gives you time for Lightning Helixes and things to kind of take into play and start putting in some pieces of removal.
With Isochron Scepter on Holy Day, it's basically just Ensnaring Bridge.
Which is why there's also a one of Angel's Grace in the list. Angel's Grace is a card that most ad nauseam players out there will be real happy to see taking part in a different deck. It is a split second, which means it can't be countered and it can't be responded to. It is 1 white. You cannot lose the game this turn. Your opponents cannot win the game this turn. At the end of the turn, damage that would reduce your life total to less than 1 reduces it to 1 instead. So it helps against your combo matchups.
And I guess the backup plan for this deck is pretty good because it plays out very much like a sort of American control list with the flash elements and some of the creatures and stuff that we've seen before as a sort of secondary plan.
Very much so, using its win conditions being heavily set in the Young Pyromancer at a 4 of, and 2 Monastery Mentors, because both of which get their triggers off of the continual casting from Isochron Scepter. Meaning, if you play one of your 2 silences under Isochron Scepter during each of your opponent's upkeep, you can keep them from playing a spell during their turn, as well as generate a token.
Randall, why don't you run us through the list real quick before we continue discussing it?
Alright, so some of the Isochron Scepter cards you can put on there are the 1 of Angel's Grace, 2 Dawn Charms, 2 Silence, and 4 Holy Days. The utility and kind of control cards are the 2 Manaleak and 2 Spell Pierce, which is basically recurring counter spells. 1 of Supreme Verdict, just in case the late game kind of gets out of control, and 3 Path to Exile. The sideboard's actually where it gets really funny, using 4 of Wear Tears, which you can put on an Isochron Scepter to continually remove any artifacts or enchantments that get in the way, Timely Reinforcements, and a 4 of Leyline of Sanctities. That kind of helps set up against any more combo matchups. Plus Relic of Progenitus is at 2, and Spellskite's at 2, just to help with some of the more fringe decks.
Yeah, so it just seems like a really powerful Jeskai control list, but it just throws in Isochron Scepter as a way to kind of even out the consistency. It's got that combo aspect to it that if you get it and they can't combat it, then you just win.
As well as having a really good Game 1 matchup, because as soon as you resolve Isochron Scepter, not a lot of players are going to go, I need to stop that. And worst case, if you don't even have the combo, Isochron Scepter continues to get you more card advantage as the game progresses, building you up even more for the late game.
It's funny, I've made decks like this in Standard before. Let's see, I took the Elite Arcanist, and I put Mizium Skin on him while I had Gutter Snipe in play, so I was just keeping them from killing anything, but I was also dealing 2 damage to my opponent every time I stopped the kill from the Mizium Skin, giving Hexproof. I had a deck with Agent of the Fates before I went full-on Mono Black Devotion, and that's where I would put Cypher on Agent of the Fates, Hidden Strings. And so there was a time when I attacked into Apollo Krenos and some other big green beater with 2 Agent of the Fates, but because they have Death Touch, he didn't block. So then I got to cast Hidden Strings, and then I untapped both of them, targeting them and forcing him to sack both his big green fatties.
Historically, a lot of the cards that have been recurring effects, Panoptic Mirror, Isochron Scepter, things like that, have always been relatively good. Paired up with the certain combinations of cards, as you said, some of the cards even in Standard just work really well with anything that gives you recurring value. It's one of the same reasons one of the biggest decks in Modern, which was Pod at the time, ended up getting banned, was because the general recurring value that you can draw out of that card.
I have an idea. Before we move on to the next deck, why don't Ben and I, since we've been listening to this list that you have, why don't Ben and I give our final judgment on it by saying whether we would play the list or not? Ben, what about you?
I like that it's kind of an established deck with a good plan B that has a kind of combo element. It feels a bit like the sort of Splinter Twin decks from that side of things. I worry that it ends up being too cute and just operates worse than a normal Jeskai control list. I would have to test it for that. And other than the Shadow of Doubt, it feels like it might be quite weak to the Coco style Melira Pod combo type of decks. So I think it could really shine in the current metagame. I'm not sure, obviously, what the world's going to look like come April and the expected Aaron Forsyth announced bannings, but it's definitely an interesting take on an established archetype, and it definitely has a plan that's working towards, so I wouldn't mind sleeping up and trying it, that's for sure.
I would play it, but I would tweak it a little bit. I wouldn't want the Dawn Charms. I would want some way to combat Court of Calling right now. I know Hallowed Moonlight wouldn't be preferable since you're trying to trigger Mentor and Pyromancer, but I would want something like that. And then you could just, even with Hallowed Moonlight, if it weren't for the fact that you had Mentor and Pyromancer, you could just cantrip. So maybe something like that. Maybe an Izzet Charm. Honestly, maybe I would replace Dawn Charm with Izzet Charm, and then silence against trying to cord, and that might actually work.
One of the good matchups you do have against, some of the better cards that you have against Cord are the silences, as well as it's without comboing off. They're just a general aggro deck, which means you can get rid of a lot of their main cards and some of their key pieces using just the typical Path to Exiles. And since most of their cards are under 3 toughness, you can also get rid of them using some of the more straight removal cards that you can put in there, like Lightning Helixes, which also give you an additional win condition by putting Lightning Helix and bolting your opponent for 3 continuously. Shadow of Doubt was specifically in there for the core decks of the format, as well as to help stop against fetch lands. Really early game, you can catch somebody off guard with that.
So yeah, I would play this. I would test it. I would tweak it, but I would definitely play this. It looks like a lot of fun, and like Ben said, it kind of looks like a good replacement for any sort of Splinter Twin. The Isochron Scepter just sort of takes the place of Splinter Twin in the Jeskai list.
As well as only requiring 2 Snapcaster Mages, because I thought about putting more in there, but I didn't want to cut down on these spells. I just kind of vamped up the recursion. A Snapcaster Mage into a Shadow of Doubt, late game after they think you've used up your Shadow of Doubts, can cut off a necessary mana or a certain color, as well as Snapcastering out a Shadow of Doubt can shut off a cord in the late game as well, which after they've spent all their mana tapped out on all their creatures, leaves you open to just kind of burn out your hand at the end of their turn into a bunch of tokens from Young Pyromancer on the start of your turn, throwing a couple Lightning Helixes at their face and swinging with Mentor tokens.
Mm-hmm. So why don't you move on to the next list that you were going to tell us about?
All right, the next list I'm going to be going over is a Jundpox list, as well as kind of just talking about the general Pox and Drudge strategies as of now. I'm going over the same reason Merfolk has always been really good. The Spreading Seas and just kind of disruption that they've had, as well as some pretty good tempo plays, have always kind of just pushed that deck over the edge. Now, with Jundpox, Jund's always been a really good deck, as well as in the format right now, it's still doing very well. One of the really cool additional things that you get from Jundpox is recursion, as well as the new card Hissing Quagmire, plus Life from the Loam. Also continually gives you a way for Death Touch. And Smallpox right now is very good in the meta, killing off some of your opponent's best lands, especially against Eldrazi.
Hissing Quagmire was one of my favorite ideas that we came up with a few weeks ago when we talked about this. The idea of bringing back Ghost Quarter with Life from the Loam to hit lands, but also bringing back Hissing Quagmire to hit the creatures was actually quite funny.
Yeah, I remember this from the beginning of the modern format. I think it's a similar deck to this one, the very first GP that was modern, and it kind of phased out as other modern decks got more streamlined and kind of ultimately more powerful. And I could see this being a really good one in the very early days of the new formats, post-Eldrazi, when everybody's sort of scrambling around to try and figure out what everything's going to look like.
And they wouldn't really see it coming. They'd have no metagame to adjust to. They just have to play things that they already know, and this would kind of prey on that.
Being a really solid attrition deck, it goes for just continually getting a bunch of card advantage off of cards from the graveyard as well. Having a 4 of Faithless Looting, 3 of Life from the Loam, and 3 Zombie Infestations as enablers. Zombie Infestation says you can discard 2 cards to get a 2/2 zombie, helping you get a lot of board as well as aggression, a way to block, as well as a win condition. You can also use cards that correspond really well with that. Including a 3 of Squee, Goblin the Bob, which is during each of your upkeeps you can put it into your hand, which gives you a recurring way to get cards into your hand. Running 2 Vengeful Pharaoh as a way for removal. Vengeful Pharaoh is a really, really fun card back from when Loam was a really good deck back in the day. What it does is, while it is in your graveyard, whenever you take any combat damage whatsoever, you can put it back on top of your deck and kill off one of your opponent's attacking creatures. Now, it does not have to be the one that dealt damage. If they swung with 3 people, and when you block one of them, but you can't kill it, you can still kill that creature because it did declare an attack.
Nice.
How you get over from locking yourself out with Vengeful Pharaoh is your cards like Life from the Loam, as well as a 2 of Dark Blast, and a lot of Dredge cards that can continually dump them in the graveyard, giving you a way to continuously just win through heavy attrition and heavy removal. Having a 1 of Murderous Cut, 3 of Abrupt Decay, as well as really good hand disruption, running 2 of Raven's Crime, citing a 3rd for more controlling matchups, as well as running the 4 of Smallpox, and 3 discard spells. I personally prefer Thoughtseize. Inquisition of Kozilek also works in that spot, as well as trying to put in another Raven's Crime. It's kind of just personal preference for discard spells.
Thoughtseize is sort of better set up at the moment just because it can hit the larger cost Eldrazi's out of people's hands.
And the current meta, Thoughtseize does work a little bit better. Inquisition is kind of more for a format where there's a lot of really low-to-the-ground cards, which you do already have games set up against, using stuff like Dark Blasts to continually get rid of even Eldrazi Mimics. Eldrazi is one of the cards you think Dark Blast wouldn't be that good against. It helps really early getting rid of some of those heavy, aggressive starts that they get, just pulling off Mimics off the table. One of the best parts about this deck is the fact that you get to side a 4 of Ancient Grudge against Affinity and against Lantern Control. 4 of Ancient Grudge and getting them in the graveyard very quickly is extremely, extremely important. As well as being able to slide a 4th Ghost Quarter and continually looping Ghost Quarters is really good in this meta. And running a 1 of Bojuka Bog on the side and 3 Leyline of the Void helps against any other graveyard-based decks.
So tell us about Bojuka Bog and how it works with the synergy of the deck.
Now, what Bojuka Bog is it's a land that comes into play tapped and taps for 1 black. But what it says is when it enters play, target player exiles their graveyard. So what you can do with it is you can play it just as a standard land and just hit somebody's graveyard just for the fun of it. But what you can continue to do is sack it off to something like Smallpox, which allows you to continually remove their graveyard. That's the Smallpox kind of dredge type lists right now, just having a heavy attrition to help get you into the late game.
All right, Ben, would you play this?
No. I prefer to be a lot more direct, have each individual card being more of a threat. The sort of the incremental build-up over time with sort of what you would consider, on the face of it, sort of weird and subpar cards, it's not my game of Magic to play.
Interestingly enough, I am someone who enjoys putting a bunch of draft-chaffed cards together, which is why I like Lantern Control. As for the direct approach, I do tend to take a more direct approach, and I'm not a very experienced dredge player. Randall is just a really experienced dredge player. I don't know that I would play this, although, depending on how the meta was, I would consider it, especially the idea of Life from the Loam on Hissing Quagmire and Bojuka Bog sounds like a lot of fun. I would consider it.
One of the biggest issues with the deck is it has a very high learning curve, and it does take a lot of time. It is a very grindy matchup, and it's not for the faint of heart. There's a couple cards, if you Murderous Cut Through on card, you can kind of be set off in a pretty bad position, but if you do play it properly, you can just completely tear apart your opponent's hand as well as their lands, and you can have a very, very good setup that'll be almost impossible to destroy. The last deck I'm going to go and just get into a basis of, and kind of bring it up a little bit more once we get further along. As we bring up more cards from Shadows over Innistrad and things along the lines of that, it's zombies, Mortar Pod. We all know that there's more zombies coming out eventually, which is going to be pretty great for the deck, but what the deck does is it requires a card called Mortar Pod. Mortar Pod is kind of the win condition of the deck, but it's only run out of 1 of just because it's an additional win condition. It is a 2-drop artifact with Living Weapon. The equipped creature goes +0/+1 and has to sacrifice this creature and it deals 1 damage to target creature player. You equip it for 2. So it's basically 2 mana to kill something off for 1 damage. What's really cool about it is you can continue to recur things like Grave Crawlers, Geralf's Messengers, and Bloodghasts, which allow you to continually bring out Grave Crawlers and get triggers off of an additional win condition, which is Blood Artist. So you get additional Blood Artist triggers from Gravecrawler, Geralf's Messengers, which allow you to continue to do massive amounts of damage and continue to loop them from your graveyard, and Bloodghast that give you an additional push for kind of an aggressive start.
I have a question.
Mm-hmm.
You told me that you're splashing red for this deck because of the lightning bolts and so on. Would you consider Barrage of Expendables in place of Mortar Pod?
Barrage of Expendables.
So that's the really bad Goblin Bombardment. If Goblin Bombardment was modern legal, I would play this deck in a heartbeat. Yeah, Goblin Bombardment is the one that's pay 1 red to sacrifice a creature, I believe. So, I'm in. I played this deck when it was legal in Standard, or the Standard version of it when Innistrad was around the first time. This is direct, kills people, and then does some weird funky things by sacrificing your creatures and bringing them back when they're not looking. I'm in.
What makes Barrage of Expendables a little bit worse than Bombardment is that you have to pay a red mana to sacrifice the creature, and it only costs a red to get the enchantment out. So I was just thinking about the idea that you have to pay to equip the Mortar Pod.
I do like the idea of it, and again, you can also go in here in addition to it. There's a lot of different concepts that kind of get to the same point. Just kind of the old namesake of the deck was Mortar Pod. I feel like Barrage of Expendables would be very good in the deck, just especially because you're using the red for a lot of sideboard cards as well as a lot of disruption, like a full set of Lightning Bolts. 3 Terminates, you're even citing a Dreadbore for Planeswalkers, you're citing Smash to Smithereens, and heck, you're citing Rakdos Charms to get rid of graveyards, to destroy artifacts, and even to help against combo players who just happen to get out a lot of tokens. You're even citing 1 Lifebane Zombie, which if you can continue to loop out your zombies, you can get back a Lifebane Zombie and just continue to tear apart some of the core decks in the meta, as well as some of just the good green-white kind of hate bear stuff. The deck will be getting a little bit better as Shadows over Innistrad and some of the cards come out. As once we start getting more into some of the future cards coming out, I can kind of go over why this deck in the future will also be progressively getting better.
All right. With that, then, we're going to move on to the next segment, which is this week's Manaleak Article of the Week. And I wasn't originally going to do my article because it seemed like self-promotion, but Ben was like, you should use your article. So I'm going to use my article. So it's on you, Ben.
Yeah, no problem.
It is the article that just went out today, the day that we're recording, which is it ethical for MTG Pro players to expect opponents to concede before the top 8 of a Grand Prix? Now, my original title was Let's Talk About Conceding Before the Top 8 of a Grand Prix, and that became the subtitle. It's not clear enough as to when someone might be conceding. So it's received a lot of comments about, no, I'll play out even to the final point of death. I won't concede before I'm dead. But it's more than that. There's a lot of nuance to the issue. But basically, Eric Froelich of Channel Fireball published an article last week. His opponents 2 rounds before the top 8 did not concede to him, even though he was undefeated and would not lose his spot in the top 8, because it would clinch Froelich's spot in the top 8. And that, in turn, would cause him to not concede to this person in a later date. As a result, he lost the match, lost the next match, and did not make top 8. The issue isn't so much Froelich, because a lot of people were attacking him on a personal level, and I think that's quite unfair, as you pointed out on Twitter as well, Ben, that he's simply bringing up the topic. And it's a topic that is worth bringing up. He figured it would be something people would be more interested in talking about than they actually were, but it's something that is worth mentioning and talking about because it's the way that pro players view the road to the top 8, which is if someone is facing against you, you've already clinched your spot, and they haven't, then rather than dream crushing, as it were, and playing and then beating them and knocking them out of contention, you would effectively grandfather them into the top 8 by conceding to them. It goes beyond simply a friend helping a friend when you imply that it's a whole network of people, so that it becomes kind of discouraging to the general Magic playing community, the idea that before they even walk into the hall, to some extent, the top 8 has already been determined through means other than playing Magic. I wanted to know what you guys thought about that.
Alright, so kind of here we get into like a battle of morals. Whether you think it's more beneficial to help out a friend or to allow others who actually want to become part of that top 8 actually wins. And that's where it kind of comes down to is whether or not you want to see somebody you know over picking them over the thousands of other people who are trying to get to that same level that you are with your friend. So personally, with me, I feel like I understand where they're coming from. I kind of see what they're doing. The same thing happens in multiple other games. Yu-Gi-Oh! As well does a lot of top 8 draws. But just kind of going along with that theme, you're not really hurting yourself so much as you're hurting the rest of the community.
Interestingly enough, there was a comment on the Reddit thread that I looked over and used for my article that said it's the same thing as being in 2-lane traffic and yielding to someone who wants to turn, and then you think you're doing someone a favor when really there's a whole row of people behind you that are having to wait.
Kind of got 2 takes on this. One, I read through Efro's article. I think he's brave to have brought it up because I think he could have seen a lot of this reaction coming from the general player base. It's kind of a scratch my back, scratch yours. And it's like, if you're a good person going through life doing lots of good things for people, naturally they might do better things for you in the future. And if their friends are seeing you do something good for them, they're more likely to do something good for you. It's kind of a natural extension of things that happen in life. Whether we like it or not, there is actually a net positive to doing it in that position. This isn't just the pros and the Pro Tours and the GPs. This goes all the way down to the PTQ circuit. I mean, you grind that, especially in the old circuit when you have the same 100 people turn up for every tournament around the UK, you build up these relationships. If you do help somebody out when there's small benefit to you to not help them out, it will be reciprocated probably somewhere down the line, and it might be 2, 3, 4 years or something, but through what you've done as a good thing, you will get something back out of it. It's just part of what Magic's game is. It's not against the rules to do any of this. Gamers are going to game, and especially at the professional level. So I think it's an overreaction, as the Magic community is tend to do, and nowhere in Efro's thing did he say, I am entitled to this, they have to scoop. He just said why it is beneficial for the other person to do it in that position.
There is one more aspect to this that we should probably look at, which is whether it is something a pro player should come to expect. You've both made very good points about why it would be good to do so, why it would be good to scoop to someone in a situation where it doesn't really harm you, but would help them and maybe get goodwill with that player. But is it reasonable for someone in his situation to expect someone in Jacob's situation to concede to him when they don't know each other?
Reasonable, I would say it's not reasonable to expect just everybody to do it. Now, I can see people that you do know who usually do. You can see it, but it's something to get upset over. You made it to that level playing the game, You have to play the game to get to that point in the first place. If two people think that they're doing the right thing, and they see the other person is doing the wrong, who's in the right and who's in the wrong? You think you're doing something right while others think that they vilify you for what you think you're doing the right thing.
And Randall's turning into Obi-Wan Kenobi on us. Everything is from your point of view. I think this is the point that Awarefro probably didn't come across as well, and I don't think he did expect somebody to scoot to him, but I think he knows of all the benefits you get from it, which then made him believe that the other person should. But nobody's entitled to the scoop. I think there's good reasons to have it. There's good reasons why it should have happened. The person can ask for it. There's nothing to stop people asking for it. The sense of expectation, though, and entitlement, I think that's where it maybe steps over the line, and that's the bit that infuriates people.
All right. Sounds like a good discussion. The discussion is already going on. It's been going on for several days by the time this comes out. It's been going on for several days on Manaleak.com/MTGUK. You can find the article. And if you want to weigh in, that's the place to do it. We very much want to hear your thoughts on the topic, but we wanted to bring to light what the topic actually is. It's not just scooping. It's not just friends helping each other. So wanted to bring that to everyone's attention so we can have a dialogue as a community about it.
If you're ever stuck in that position and where somebody expects you to fold, just know that it is from your point of view. If you wish to fold to them and expect something later, you might not always get it in return.
All right, okay. Ben, where do we head now for the community topic?
So we head into everybody's favourite topic at the moment with this Shadow over Innistrad spoiler season. What we had at the Grand Prix over the weekend was a sort of rush of spoilers. They want big, epic reveals of the top-level cards, and boy did they hit it out of the park this time. They've doubled down in flavour in a big way. So at each of the 3 Grand Prix over the weekend in Bologna, in Detroit, and in Melbourne, they had these escape rooms. So basically, you go in through a door, you're locked in, there's loads of puzzles to work out, and then at the end of it, normally you would escape from the escape room. But in this case, for solving the different puzzles, the teams were basically shown cards from the new set for solving the puzzles, which then they got to spoil out over onto the internet and let social media sort of blend it through. So you had the Markov Manor in Bologna, the Thraben Cathedral in Detroit, and the Stitcher's Lab in Melbourne. And because of the way they were staggered through the day with the time zones, it even meant that there was this drip feed for over an even longer period of time. Epic looking things. I wish I'd been at one of those events for them. It's just lots and lots of fun. And then people like the Lady Planeswalker Society and some of the other sort of internet celebrities and forums have been sent out these sort of really cool looking boxes, like puzzle boxes with insignias and stuff on them that they've opened up, and they've had clues and crazy things in them, but they've led towards a spoiler card. There's been quizzes on the internet for people to sort of, find out the clues and get emailed spoiler cards that they can then share out with their friends and stuff. It's just been one really epic event. So before we go on to some of the cards that we've already seen that we really like, what do you guys think of the way this happened over the weekend?
I feel like just engaging the community as a whole in the release of the spoilers rather than just letting them accidentally get leaked, but more pushing towards letting the community and the Magic community as a whole come together to kind of figure these out, kind of immerses the player base, as well as gets them looking forward to the new sets.
I think it was brilliant, honestly. I think they did everything right. This kind of thing, I hope they do more. They even hired cosplayers. They're doing everything right. They're engaging the community by even hiring members of the community to cosplay. They had all these exercises for people to do. They were incorporating all their high-profile members of the community, such as the Lady Planeswalker Society, to solve puzzles. And I'm proud of the Lady Planeswalker Society for being part of that, because I'm in their Facebook group, the community. And that's actually where I've gotten multiple members of Draw 4 podcasts, such as Brenda Smith and the Kelly brothers. And I want to see a lot of this kind of thing because it shows that they understand that the game is nothing without the community, and they made us part of the process, rather than just kicking cards over to their favorite podcasts and websites, which they'll do as well. There's nothing wrong with that. But to give the first big spoilers to the community is huge, and they should keep doing it.
So we got some nice new toys to look at. So what I was going to do was run over 6 of my favourites that we've seen already, and then invite the both of you to either comment on the cards that I've talked through or flag up some of your favourites as well. So I think I have to start with the Archangel Avacyn herself, the headliner of the set. The general storyline, without too many spoilers of Innistrad, is that she's gone a bit cray. So She is a 3 colors, 2 white legendary creature angel. She has flash and flying and vigilance. Let's just keep adding the keywords on there. And when she enters the battlefield, creatures you control gain indestructible into end of turn. That's all pretty good for a 5-mana creature. However, when a non-angel creature you control dies, so you can flash this in combat to make sure that this happens, for example, you get to transform her at the beginning of your next upkeep. She's a 4/4, and when you flip her over, on the backside, she turns into Avacyn the Purifier, and she's a red creature on the back. She has flying still. She's upgraded to a 6/5, because she's obviously very angry now, and she does 3 damage to each other creature and each opponent. So it's obviously very, very powerful, just on the front side. I'm interested to see where they find a home, because it seems more controlling because of the board sweeper effect, but also it sort of indestructibles the rest of your team if you've got an aggressive start. So I'm really interested to see where this ends up, and playsets are already selling for like $100 or something, and foil copies are going to be a $1,000,000,000. So really, really interesting card, as well as super flavorful.
They've done something with some of their flip cards with opposite type effects, such as the new card that got spoiled, I think, today, where the front side is you gain a life when a creature enters the battlefield, but the flip side is when a creature dies, then you drain a life. And with Archangel Avacyn, I want to make sure people don't make this mistake with it. If you flash her in, then things become indestructible. So she's got 2 opposite effects on her. The first one is to keep things from dying, so that gives you longevity, right? But then after that turn, now things can die, so they get a chance to Doomblade her or whatever, but if they don't and then they kill something else, now they have to worry about her flip clearing the board.
Yeah, you're dead right. I didn't catch that, and there's so much text on the front side of this and so many crits it can do.
As an Eternal player, I'm really looking forward to Archangel Avacyn and Commander, just because the board wipe, like the damage dealt, as well as the fact that most commanders with Flash are kind of overpowered. I like the flavor of it making Avacyn mad, especially because all you ever see is the white, the holy side of Avacyn, and just kind of seeing what happens, like just the flavor-wise. Like, I love the flavor, the artwork of most of the set. I'm just in love with the set already.
Yeah, and the one thing Innistrad did the first time around was the huge flavor hit, and they sort of really ramped it up. So the next 3 cards I'll talk together, but from a flavor point of view. So we have Relentless Dead, Thing in the Ice, and Aberrant Researcher. So Relentless Dead and Aberrant Researcher are just direct callbacks to the original Innistrad format. Relentless Dead is literally a zombie that's crashed through from ranks of the Relentless Dead, the enchantment I think it was, and it's now the picture is of the zombie in the cathedral after breaking through the glass window. And I'm sure Randall will comment on how absurd the actual card itself is in a second. Thing in the Ice is a 1 colorless 1 blue creature that's a 0/4 defender with like 4 tokens on it, and whenever you cast instant or sorcery spell, I believe it is, you remove a counter, and then when you remove the last counter, you flip it to its rear face, and it becomes a 7/8 Kraken that bounces non-horrors back to people's hands. But it's this flavour of there is literally a thing in the ice has melted, and the thing has come out. It's just perfect. And then you have Aberrant Researcher that is literally Delver of Secrets stats for a 3 colors, 1 blue, 3/2 flying creature. And then the last cards I wanted to call out, I think will be huge standard players and probably good for my cube as well. Declaration in Stone is a 1 colorless 1 white sorcery that exiles a creature and all other creatures with its type, and people get to investigate, which are new cool clue tokens that can come onto the battlefield. And I think where this home is in aggressive decks, because you don't want it in control decks because you're giving up value, they get to draw cards with it, but it's unconditional removal for 2 mana that can get your sort of white weenie board flooding through. And then the last card I wanted to comment on is Heir of Falconwrath, which was one of the very first cards spoiled over last weekend. It's 1 colorless, 1 black for a 2/1, so not great on its base stats there, Goblin Piker. But it says discard a card, transform her, and activate this ability only once each turn. And she turns into a 3/2 flying creature, which is amazing for 1 colorless and 1 black. It's a cuber's dream, because you get to play it in black reanimate strategies by discarding a card, and it's great in the black beatdown strategy. So this is perfect, going across all those different archetypes. And it gives us our first real obvious of why would I want to discard a card? And it's because Madness is back. And I remember Madness from the first time around. And
Relentless Dead.
It's just crazy. Yeah, Heir of Falconwrath and Relentless Dead will probably be buddies in a standard deck coming soon. So, Randall, your thoughts on Relentless Dead?
Relentless Dead was the card I was really looking forward to out of this set that just kind of pushed the zombie deck over the edge. As 2 black, 2/2, zombie for 1, as Menace. As well as when it dies, you can pay 1 black to put it back in your hand. So it has that zombie recursion. But the part of it that really pushes it over the edge is that when it dies, you can pay X mana. And if you do, you can return any zombie creature with converted mana cost X from your graveyard to the battlefield. Which means a lot more synergies, which means with open mana, well, instead brings back Dral's Messenger and Modern, which just kind of makes everything just damage, recursion, and it just kind of gives you a sense to kind of move on. It's just an amazing card. Other card that I did want to just kind of say is one of my favorites in the entire set has to be Pour Over Pages. I'm just looking towards it and just kind of seeing where it can go because it seems like a good card for 3 colorless, 2 blue, draw 3 cards, untap 2 lands, and then discard a card. I just kind of want to see who can kind of break that card. I'm really looking forward to that card. Love the set, love the artwork, love the callbacks. Just kind of, Innistrad has always been one of my favorites. Kamigawa is probably my favorite art-wise, but this is a really close second.
All right, this is our community question. What is your favorite Magic the Gathering card that has been spoiled so far in Shadows over Innistrad? And do you like it for its abilities, artwork, or flavor? So I will answer Ben's question, which also happens to be the community question. As far as flavor and artwork and everything goes, Thing in the Ice is my favorite, because it's a nice callback to Deep Sea Kraken, which in one of my first articles for Manaleak, I made a reference to Deep Sea Kraken. It was an article that was kind of obscure. People didn't really look at it or engage with it, but it was a fun little thing I did. It was a handful of movies that were considered classics in some way or another that I retold in the context of a Magic the Gathering game. And when I did Clash of the Titans, I had Deep Sea Kraken as the Kraken that was going to show up and attack Athens. And Thing in the Ice has that nice flavor to it. The artwork shows that there's boats around it, and then when it turns into the actual Kraken, then the boats start flying out of the water. It reminds me of a sci-fi movie I watched when I was a kid where there was a big, I think it was a dinosaur that was in a block of ice. It was back in black and white kind of stuff. And overall, it's kind of cool, but I think a close second for me as far as flavor goes would have to be Clue tokens, because the Clue tokens actually have flavor text. I don't know if you guys saw that, but it does.
Yeah. You need to break out your deerstalkers and your pipes and get your magnifying glasses and get on down with it. But yeah, they're really cool, really interesting, and I think they're mostly there for the draft environment, if I'd have to guess.
All right, Ben, what is your favorite card out of the set that's been spoiled so far, and why?
So my favorite card of the set that's been spoiled so far is the Heir of Vulcanwrath. It's my favorite card that's a slam dunk to go into my cube. It's going to get me playing Beatdown again in Standard, I think. And if you haven't seen it, there's an amazing GIF, because the top line of her corset and her shoulders and where her skin's showing is the outline of a bat. This great GIF that shows a bat flying out of her, which I think was intentional by the artist and is just amazing.
Showing the GIF now.
As well as my favorite artwork, just artwork-wise, I have to say Shard of Broken Glass.
Oh, yeah.
Just kind of the reflection in it. I just really like the artwork for Shard of Broken Glass. Favorite card overall has to probably be Pour Over Pages kind of as a card. The one I'm looking forward to the most, though, has to be the Relentless Dead.
All right, yeah, that's going to see a lot of play in multiple formats. I know that you have a place reserved for that in your zombie deck for Modern already. Just kind of sitting there, sleeves sitting off to the side, ready for that Relentless Dead to drop.
Picking up some extra grave crawlers, just kind of getting ready for that zombie hype.
All right, so now that we are at the end, thanks for joining me, Randall. We're going to say our farewells.
Anyway, I was Randal Minnick. It was a pleasure for you guys to have me on the show. Thank you so much. And just reserve a spot for zombies. Look out for zombies. And don't let the zombie hype die.
And from Ben, it was great being here once again. If anybody wants to reach out and make contact with me, Twitter is the best way. I'm at Carboreeta. That's Carboeeta. And I've actually started streaming over the last week. Now Sealed Leagues are back on Magic the Gathering Online, and that's also Carboreeta over at Twitch. No schedule, but in the UK evening times, I will be around if anybody wants to pop in and say hi.
So UK evening times, what about like 7 to 9?
Yeah, around 8, 9 o'clock in the evening. Couple of games of, I'm not on for a long time. Couple of games of Sealed, and good times.
All right, and that's around 9 o'clock GMT. So if you're in the US, then do the math on that, because here in Texas that is minus 6 hours. I am Joseph Dunlap. I am the executive producer of Draw 4, featured writer for Manaleak.com, and it's always a pleasure getting to talk Magic with these guys. This has been Drawful Podcast. Until next time, we wish you good fortune, may you draw well, and brains. Thought you'd appreciate that, Randall.
Yeah, I did. Very much so. Thank you.